Hello again, YouTube family. Thanks for those of you who are going to be joining me on this video. And if you enjoy the video, please give it a like. If you've not subscribed to the channel, hook me up, give me a subscription. Cost you nothing. But let's go into this video. This video is a response to a comment that I had on my last video. My last video was about the Israel-Hamas conflict, or in this case, the insane bombardment by Israel of the Gaza Strip after the equally horrendous Hamas attack on October 7th. And from that video, I got a response that was a very respectful response, and I appreciate it. I appreciate the respectful response. Somebody responded. It was a long reply, and it sounds like a gentleman who doesn't necessarily agree with me ideologically, but was still very complimentary. Thank you, and respectful in the reply, and I do appreciate it. And I commented back to the person that I will make a video and respond to your comment, because his comment included asking me to explain what I don't like about the previous president, which is Donald Trump, and also asking me to say what Trump did that was good, which is a lot easier than going through the litany of things I don't like about Trump. And from the get-go, I am about as anti-Trump as you can be. Donald Trump, to me, is by far the worst president of my lifetime, and that's saying a lot. I mean, I would put Donald Trump in the bad category of being equal to someone like Dick Cheney. And Dick Cheney was bad. He was a bad person. And but Dick Cheney wasn't the president. Donald Trump was the president. So as far as it goes for me, I made a group of slides I'm going to go through and talk about the things that transpired while Trump was president. Some of them, if you are on the right, you may say, I like that. I may go through all this stuff and explain what I don't like about Trump, and you may say, I liked every bit of it. I love Trump. And that's fine. That's your perspective. My perspective is by far different. I have a different perspective. And just because I have a different perspective does not mean that I'm right and you're wrong. Just as you having a different perspective from me doesn't mean that you're right and I'm wrong. We have our own perspectives. And so because this commenter was so respectful and complimentary, I said I would make a video and respond to his comment, and so here we go. Let's dive into it. This is the comment he left. The commenter's name is Bill Michaels, and he says, overall, I appreciate your intellectual fleshing out of the situation. For the most part, you were speaking my own mind. I'm 70 years, I assume he means 70 years old. In the 60s, I went to Berkeley with my big hippie sis to fight for the freedom of speech on campus. We won the right. Somewhere along the trail, we've lost that. Our schools are a complete and total mess. I don't know exactly where you're getting that the schools are a complete and total mess. The schools are horribly underfunded, and it shows in our academic standing in the world, and broadly among advanced industrialized nations, we do lag in education, because, once again, we way underfund our education system. The Middle East is, and has been for many, many years, a volatile place. America has been largely responsible for that. We need to feed the profits of the war machine, paid for by our politicians on the take. As you stated, kill family members and the survivors are now your enemy. Our open border is allowing anybody to come in. Israel will never be able to rid the world of Hamas. They're, with USA help, creating more. I'm grateful for the Second Amendment, which may be used to hopefully defend against the incoming terrorist attacks on our country. In my 30s and 40s, I would have been considered a bleeding heart liberal. Now I'm considered far right wing. My views have evolved, but I'm far from that. Pretty center, actually. I would like a video on all the reasons you can't stand our last president. That's what this video is. He annoys the crap out of me, but when I see his policies, I am aligned with many of them. We need a leader that isn't owned by any of the entities that have corrupted this country to such a high level. He qualifies. I'm mostly aligned with Vivek. I believe the war machine cannot allow someone like that to become president. I wouldn't be surprised if 45 is killed. They've tried everything else, exposing their corruption while doing so. How many presidents in the past have promised to move the capital to Israel? All talk. I'm rambling a bit, but hope you get the gist. My only criticism that may help you grow your channel: make a list of things that Trump did that were good. You did it for Joe, who who in my mind is the worst prez ever. I have participated in and seen so many useless wars created by or sponsored by good old US of A. Last comment, I'm glad that Ben Shapiro doesn't have access to the red button. Keep going, mate, whether I agree with you or not. Your thoughts are clear and well spoken. And that was the comment, and I do appreciate the comment. And by all means, I will keep going, but I appreciate the comment. As you can see, it was a very respectful, polite comment, and I do appreciate that. So let's dive into, I put together a group of slides, whatever you want to call them, to go through what was done during the Trump administration. But actually, before we get to that, let's take a step back for a moment. Let's talk about who Donald Trump is. Donald Trump is a child of privilege. He was born into one of the wealthier families in the country. His dad, back in the 70s, was worth hundreds of millions of dollars at a time when there were no billionaires. Someone with hundreds of millions of dollars was one of the wealthiest people on earth. So Donald Trump grew up with all of the privilege that comes with wealth. Donald Trump had access to, if he had difficulties learning in school, his parents could hire tutors. They had the funding to provide for Donald Trump every possibility to be successful because of wealth. That's one of the things that wealth does give you, is access to things most people don't have access to. Some people don't have access to. In some cases, you got people that have no access to them. For instance, tutoring, private tutoring. It's pricey. If you've got the money, you can do it. There are some people who are middle-class Americans who will cut some things out of their lives to provide private tutoring for a child they have who's struggling in school or whatever. But for Donald Trump, there was no sacrifice. His family was wealthy to a point where they could blow tons of money, and they did. And Donald Trump's dad did. Donald Trump's dad gave his kids an amazing amount of money during his life. Not to mention, Donald Trump inherited around $450 million from his dad when his father passed away. And the Trump organization that Donald Trump runs, and that he behaves like he's some kind of self-made person and built this phenomenal business, it's his dad's company. Donald Trump got out of Penn and went to work for his dad at the Trump organization. And then Donald Trump took over when his dad passed away. The accountant you probably heard in the news that was having to testify in front of, for some of these court cases, especially the financial case in New York City, that accountant worked for the Trump organization back when Trump's dad ran it. And so, this is Donald Trump's father's business. Donald Trump, to me, seems to be by far the dumbest president I've seen in my lifetime. I'm guessing probably the most ignorant president we've ever had. We're talking about a guy who suggested during the COVID pandemic injecting bleach into your veins because bleach kills viruses. And then he went on about sunlight. Sunlight kills viruses. And he was talking aloud in this stream of consciousness kind of way about, is there a way to get the sunlight into the body? And I can only imagine the medical professionals that were on hand for that were slapping their face saying, how is this guy suggesting this, thinking he's coming up with some brilliant idea? But that's Donald Trump. Donald Trump will assert idiocy. And truth be told, if Donald Trump would have handled the COVID pandemic somewhat better than what he did, he might still be president. He barely lost. He lost by over 7 million votes to Joe Biden overall, but most of that vote difference was New York and California. Joe Biden won the presidential election in 2020 by around 40,000 votes from literally a few states. It was a very close election. Just like when Donald Trump won in 2016, he won literally by around 40 to 50,000 votes over a few states. And perhaps this is how presidential elections are going to go for some time, where you have a small group of states and a very small group of vote differences that determine who becomes president and who doesn't. But Donald Trump comes from a family of wealth. Donald Trump obviously has worked, while his dad was alive, he was working to try and get the admiration of his father. His father was this successful businessman who was a builder. Donald Trump went into the business. He became a builder. Donald Trump tells the story that he started his business with just $1 million loan from his dad, which isn't true. Donald Trump's first project, his dad basically ran the project, and he put his son Donald out there as the face of the project to try and get a name in New York, in the New York real estate community for his son, after Donald Trump joined the Trump organization as one of the executives working for his father. And there's nothing wrong with being born into wealth and privilege. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. I've had people say that I hate wealthy people, which isn't true. I don't just hate wealthy people. I have a disdain for wealthy people who are born into exceeding wealth and behave like somehow they accomplished something by being pushed out of a birth canal into a wealthy family is some kind of accomplishment. I have a disdain for the way in this country we treat people who are wealthy like somehow wealth means hard work, wealth means intelligence, wealth means competence. We attribute positive characteristics to people who are wealthy, whether they deserve those praises and those positive attributes or not, whereas we attach negative attributes to people who are not wealthy. So somebody who's struggling financially, we'll hear people say that they're lazy or they're dumb or whatever. You attach negative attributes to a lack of money, positive attributes to an abundance of money, and neither of those are necessarily true. Somebody can be very hardworking, intelligent, competent, and just not have the good fortune of having a good paying job or being born into a wealthy family and struggle financially. By the same token, somebody can be born into extreme wealth and suggest that you inject bleach into your veins. For me, when it comes to voting, if I have a choice between two people and I think both of the choices are bad, I will choose whoever appears to be the more intelligent option to me. I will go with intelligent. Donald Trump, along with being not very intelligent, also is an extreme narcissist. Donald Trump cares about one person, and that one person is Donald Trump. He has some concern about his daughter Ivanka, not because of being a father and fatherly love attachment, but because of some really odd, off-putting attraction to his daughter Ivanka. And you can look at the way he treats his sons and his other daughter. He doesn't care much about them either. His sons have been pursuing the approval of their father the way Donald Trump did for his father. And I'm assuming just like he never got, they never got. But Donald Trump's father helped him immensely throughout his business career until his father passed away. And when his father passed away, he left Donald Trump for over $400 million. Donald Trump blew that $400 million, but he was able to present himself, to use that wealth he got, to present himself as a successful businessman. And he blew through that $400 million. But then he had a television network offer him a role on a reality TV show through the run of The Apprentice that Donald Trump was on. He made around another $400 million from that show, and he blew through that. Donald Trump is not a good businessman. He's not very intelligent. He was benefited with extreme wealth, which allowed him to present himself as a successful businessman. He had a writer write a book in the 80s called The Art of the Deal, which made Donald Trump famous, more famous. He was already wealthy from his family. He had this book written to portray him as some magnanimous deal maker, and then he got elected president. So as far as Donald Trump, he's someone I'm not going to choose anyway because he came across as a con artist and overall a rather ignorant person who just happens to have been blessed with wealth from birth. And as far as the con artist part, Donald Trump's been a con artist for a very long time. There are numerous stories prior to him becoming president, which explains the con artist part, also explains the bad business part. And so let's dive into the reply to the comment. As far as while Trump was in office, the judiciary. In 4 years, Donald Trump placed 53 federal judges. For context, Obama, over the course of his 8 years in office, placed 55 federal judges. Trump placed in 4 years 53, compared to 55 placed over 8 years by Obama. This was made possible by Mitch McConnell fast-tracking all of Donald Trump's judicial nominations. Just like when Obama was in office, Mitch McConnell tried to slow down all of the judicial nominations to try and make sure Obama got as few as possible pushed through. Trump flipped 3 of the 13 federal appeals courts to being ideologically right-wing, and he has moved the U.S. judiciary to the right, and it will be there for decades because these are lifetime appointments he made. 53 lifetime appointments, which includes 3 Supreme Court justices placed during just a 4-year term in office. And that move made the Supreme Court very right-wing, ideological, and theocratic, where they are taking their own religious beliefs into account instead of just basing their decisions on the Constitution. They're adding in the aspect of religion. They're religious, and by all means, if you have a sincere religious belief, follow it. My problem is when we try and force other people to follow your religious belief. That's protected against in the Constitution, but when you have the Supreme Court justices willing to violate that to push theocratic ideas on the country, well, then you have a lot of people who are going to be disheartened and upset. And so, for instance, this may be something that right-wing people will say is an accomplishment of Trump's. It's something he got done. I mean, he got it done because of Mitch McConnell fast-tracking those appointments. And is moving our courts to the right, and they will be there for decades. To me, that's a bad thing. That's one of the things I look at that's really, really bad. These judicial moves is what led to the overturning of Roe versus Wade, which has hounded the Republican Party since that decision was made. These moves were made in the judiciary to accomplish that goal. Republicans were never going to be able to have enough of a majority in the House and Senate to put in a federal ban on abortion. The only way to accomplish that would be to have the judiciary overturn Roe versus Wade. They were able to stack the court. I mean, part of that was denying Obama a Supreme Court nomination that he put forward. The Senate refused to do their job and hold confirmation hearings on Merrick Garland's nomination, and that led to the overturning of Roe versus Wade, which, if people are still pissed about that, could have ramifications in the upcoming election this year in 2024. So for me, the judiciary being moved far to the right, a very bad thing. As far as the climate, Trump campaigned and promised to overturn the Obama-era climate policies, and he didn't overturn them just because necessarily they were bad, but because Obama did them. Trump seemed to be on a mission early in his presidency to use the presidential orders to basically try and undo everything Obama had done. It's like he was trying to erase the black president from history, sort of. And this including Trump withdrawing from the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement. That's something he was able to unilaterally do on his own as the chief executive in the government. That agreement set clear goals for countries to move to renewable energy and to avoid the worst effects of climate change, as long as we could hit our goals and as long as other countries would stay on track and try and hit their goals. And this agreement would keep the U.S. at the forefront of leading the world and guiding us into the future. And one of the things that characterizes Trump's presidency is isolationist policy, trying to withdraw us from being a partner in the world to just looking out for ourselves. You look out for you, I look out for me. And isolationism isn't that good. And one of the things that is good is for us to be able to be a country other people look to for leadership. When we're not there, there's a void that exists. And while Trump was in office, that void was filled by China. So China became a much bigger leader on the world stage because we pulled out of that position. Trump made the conscious decision to pull us out of that position. And so China took that position. Trump weakened the two Obama-era policies that would have helped us achieve our climate goals, and that is with the Paris Climate Accord, Clean Power Plan, and the National Environmental Policy Act. He repealed both of them. The Clean Power Plan targeted reducing pollution in the electricity and vehicle sectors, the two biggest creators of greenhouse gas pollutions in the United States, and the National Environmental Policy Act governed large infrastructure projects to reduce their impact on climate change, and he undid that. And there was an article I read after Biden got elected, before he took office. A group of environmentalists were saying that even if Biden undoes what Trump put in place, all of the deregulation on pollution that Donald Trump put in place, if Biden was to undo that on his first day in office, it would take around 10 years to undo the damage Trump did in 4 years. And Biden did undo a great deal of that. Biden spent his first few days in office also putting out the presidential orders to continue or do away with policies that were in place when he took office. And that is something every president does, but you don't normally just go down the list and try and undo everything the president before you did, because normally you don't have this big of a disagreement where everything you do is wrong, everything I do is right kind of thing. On climate, Donald Trump was atrocious. There was no reason for us to pull out of the Paris Climate Accord, and there was no reason for us to leave that part of the stage open for somebody else. to take our place. As far as immigration, Trump's big campaign push was that he would build a wall along our southern border and that Mexico was going to pay for it. Let's be real, if you're a sensible, normal person, you know that Mexico was never going to pay for a border wall. We could build a border wall, but we're going to pay for it ourselves, and the cost is going to be in the billions. The border wall Trump had promised was never completed, not even close. I think they had about 40 to 50 miles of wall built. The cost was going to, as I said, run into the billions. So the people constantly complaining about our national deficit and our debt and all the government spending. They wanted to waste billions of dollars on a wall that was going to be largely ineffective anyway. Over half the people that are in this country illegally, historically, are visa overstays. By that rationale, over half the people that are here illegally are visa overstays. They flew into the country and they just didn't fly out. And a border wall is not going to keep anybody from flying into the country. So over half of the people who are here illegally would not be affected by putting a wall on our southern border. And so that's why I say the wall would be largely ineffective. Aside from that, of the 40 to 50 miles of wall Trump did build, you already had people cut through it to get into the country anyway. So as far as the wall is going to do some kind of miraculous job, it's just not. For the most part, it's a massive waste of billions of dollars that we could spend somewhere else, actually helping people in the country rather than trying to keep people out. Trump pressured Mexico and Central American countries to make it more difficult for people to travel from Central and South America to the United States southern border, and that was just to make an already difficult trip more difficult and more dangerous, and that was to try and prevent people from traveling from Central and South America to our southern border. Trump started the family separation policy, where children were taken away from their parents, and this was literally just an attempt to discourage migrants from coming across the U.S. border. The problem there was Trump's first Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, explained to him that migrants coming to the United States seeking asylum are not illegal. It is not illegal in any way for them to cross the U.S. border. It's baked into our laws. I mean, you have to understand that people who made our Constitution came here seeking asylum from European countries, mostly England. But I mean, they built it into the cake that this is a country that accepts people in here for asylum, and that people coming here seeking asylum have every right to come into this country and request asylum. And that's why Trump did the family separation policy, thinking that if families started hearing that your kids are going to be taken away from you and put in cages, you're going to be put in separate cages away from your kids where you can't look over them, can't protect them, that would discourage people from crossing the border to request asylum. That was a horrible, inhumane way to try and deter asylum-seeking immigration. And again, he was doing this as a deterrent to a legal process of coming here and seeking asylum. Even after the Trump administration tried to undo that family separation policy, when he left office, there were still children separated from their parents. We couldn't match kids back up to their parents. And that's atrocious. The migrant crisis which Trump faced in office and that Biden's still facing today is a crisis of Trump's own creation. Trump wanted to cut U.S. aid to Central and South American countries. Again, part of that, take care of your own, don't worry about anybody else. But the problem is, we're all living on this planet together. Other people's problems are sometimes our problem. And you had people working, the volunteers working for USAID, trying to tell Trump, don't cut the money, because that USAID is the only thing keeping some of these people in their home countries. That's the only thing giving them hope in their home countries. If you take that hope away, then you're going to end up with a massive amount of people willing to take the perilous journey to the U.S. southern border to request asylum. And that's what happened. Trump cut around $500,000 in aid to Central and South American countries, and we end up with a humanitarian crisis on our southern border that we're still dealing with today. People literally are criticizing Biden for it, and it was literally a creation of Donald Trump's. But that's where we are at with that. It's unfortunate, but again, that plays into the idiocy that I see from Donald Trump. The $500 million in cuts that we saved, to you and me, may sound $500 sounds like a lot of money. In context of the U.S. federal budget, it's not that much money, especially when it keeps all these people from rushing our southern border requesting asylum. And it's going to cost us billions now that we have however many, 1.5 million, maybe more people at the southern border. And that's one of the ways that you have people like Republicans in our government who are penny smart and dollar foolish. They'll save some money, cut this program, save some money, and it turns around and costs us billions, costs us way more than we saved on the other end. We saw the same thing happen with the savings and loan debacle during the Reagan administration. He saved some money on some regulators' jobs and benefits. In the long run, he cost us billions of dollars. Cost us a few $1 billion to bail out the savings and loan debacle. Trump also, while he was in office, diverted military funding to begin building the border wall. So that's money that was marked for the military. Because Trump is the commander-in-chief of the military, he can divert that money willy-nilly himself, and he did. So military money got diverted to his pet project. And again, you may say you like the ideal of a border wall. It makes you feel warm and cozy inside. That's fine for you. But if you poll the American population, I doubt you'll get anywhere close to 50% of people agreeing to spend that kind of money to build a wall on our southern border. As far as trade goes, Trump made promises to bring back U.S. jobs from overseas. Donald Trump's vice president, Mike Pence, he was the former governor of Indiana, and there was a big spectacle made after Trump and Pence won the presidential election in 2016. Prior to them taking office, there was a carrier plant in Indiana, Pence's home state, that was going to offshore jobs to Mexico, send jobs to Mexico. Donald Trump and Pence visited the carrier plant, and they made a deal with Carrier, and that deal included massive tax breaks for the corporation, including federal tax breaks and state tax breaks to keep jobs there. And they used it as propaganda at the beginning of really prior to their administration starting in that transition period, when most of the jobs there got sent to Mexico anyway, and the ones that stayed were only temporary. Eventually, those jobs left too. Carrier still got the multi-year tax breaks. They got what the corporation wanted, and in the end, they still shipped the jobs away. We know that petitions filed by workers for federal assistance for jobs that are lost due to trade, that around 202,151 more jobs were offshored, at least while Trump was in office. On record, Trump is the president with the most job losses during his presidential term. The massive job losses were obviously due to COVID-19, but not just due to COVID-19, partially due to Trump's poor handling of COVID-19. Trump vowed to fix our trade deficit with other nations. He backed out of NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, and the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and he began a trade war with China. Trump added tariffs on imports from China. This led to China retaliating with levying their own tariffs on imports from the United States, and it led to around a $370 billion increase in product costs that were eaten by a combination of companies and consumers in America. The China reaction put the U.S. farmers in an unsustainable position where China just willy-nilly decided to stop importing crops from the United States. A big one of those was soybeans. Soybean farmers in America were pretty much destitute because of how much they exported to China. And China started buying, I believe, from Brazil, from a South American country, the soybeans. And so as a result, our U.S. government, the Trump administration, had to start making massive payouts to farmers to keep them afloat because he just destroyed their business. Some of the pain that he created was eased with the trade deal he made with China. It was a multi-phase trade deal. He did phase 1 when he left office. We never got a phase 2. He left office before phase 2 ever showed up, but that didn't decrease our trade deficit with China, and that did not necessarily bring back exports to some of the farmers who lost a large amount of their annual revenues. Trump recreated a NAFTA deal with Canada and Mexico, and that combined with his trade deal with China left the United States with a larger trade deficit when he left office than when he came into office. So Trump, the art of the deal guy, made some bad deals. He undid NAFTA just to basically recreate NAFTA, to have his name put on it, and to do what Trump does. Trump is someone who's always trying to sell himself. He's always in the business of selling himself. He tries to push his branding and advertise that as it's good just because it's the Trump brand. Under Trump, our trade deficit with foreign countries increased to its largest point in 14 years, since well before the Obama years. Donald Trump is not some artist with deal making. He makes bad deals. He just puts his name on it and tries to sell you on the idea that it's a great deal. That's it. You have the tax cuts in Trump's first year in office. He was trying, from the get-go, he was trying to repeal and replace Obamacare. I don't know if you remember when he was campaigning for president during the general election, Donald Trump went on 60 Minutes, and he made the claim that he and his selection for Health and Human Services Secretary had already put together a great deal. It was going to be a beautiful deal. Healthcare was going to be free. It wasn't going to cost anybody anything. It was going to be a great deal. And they were down to dotting the I's and crossing the T's on having that legislation done before they got elected. However, the truth is that he and people within his campaign never came up with a health care plan. When Donald Trump took office, he ordered the Republicans in Congress to come up with a health care plan so that they could repeal Obamacare or replace it with a plan that had Trump's brand on it, that had the Trump name on it. And Republicans came up with a really bad health care plan. It didn't pass. They were unable to repeal Obamacare and replace it with the Republican plan, and that characterized most of the first year of Donald Trump's 4 years in office, was taken up wasting time. Trump notoriously said, who knew the health care was so difficult? Everybody knew it was difficult. And towards the end of the year, in December, they passed a tax cuts bill. After they failed on the repeal and replace Obamacare, they went to tax cuts. The tax cut bill cut corporate taxes from 35% down to 21%. It cut the highest marginal tax rate down from 39.6% to 37%. Over the long run, the tax bill that was passed late in Donald Trump's first year in office, over 80% of the benefits go to the wealthiest earners. Loopholes for corporations and individuals also were supposed to have been done away with. That didn't happen. They still existed. So you had wealthy individuals and corporations who got their taxes cut massively, and then the loopholes they used to avoid paying taxes were still there. Another aspect of note for the tax cut bill was that there was tax cuts for pass-through income, which is significant because Donald Trump's income is pass-through income with the Trump Organization. So Donald Trump, the president who signed this bill into law, he got a massive tax cut on his own businesses, which I believe was put in there to make sure Donald Trump signed it, to make sure that he was going to sign it because he himself was going to get a massive tax cut. This bill changed with things like withholding tables. What we saw was late in 2017, towards the end of Donald Trump's first year in office, the bill got passed. The following year, when people filed their taxes, you had some people who normally got tax refunds that maybe got a smaller refund, in some cases got no refund, in other cases owed taxes. They went from normally getting a tax refund to suddenly they owed taxes, and part of that was because of the withholding tables changes. And so you had people who were upset with the tax cut bill because all of a sudden, instead of getting a tax refund, they're owing money to the government in early 2018. And the tax cut bill was largely unpopular, which is unique because normally tax cut bills that cut taxes, are popular. But it was made very well known as this bill was being put together that it was going to mostly benefit the wealthy. One of the reasons why it benefits the wealthy so heavily is because in 2025, if you're not rich, your tax cuts go away anyway. But the ones for the corporations and the wealthiest in the country, it continues beyond there. You had wealthy individuals who saw cuts in income taxes, minimum taxes, estate taxes, and gift taxes. The tax cuts were supposed to pay for themselves through capital investment, hiring, and wage increases. That didn't happen. What did happen was record amounts of stock buybacks, along with massive corporate bonuses. The kind of thing corporations are always doing. And since they had more money because of the tax cuts, they did it bigger. Meanwhile, our budget deficit ballooned to over $1 trillion per year, and our national debt increased significantly while Trump and Pence were in office. As far as foreign policy, Trump went out of his way to befriend authoritarian leaders while alienating normal U.S. allies. Trump questioned the NATO alliance. Trump ended multiple international accords, including the Iran nuclear deal, membership in the World Health Organization, membership in the UN Human Rights Council, and, as I said before, the Paris Climate Accord. Trump deteriorated the U.S.-China relationship. Trump moved the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. You had mentioned in your comment that a lot of presidents had talked about doing that. There's a reason why they didn't, because it has the ability to cause angst and destabilization in that area and to cause more fighting. And the move of the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem is a symbolic thing anyway. Why start more fighting over symbolism and staking a side to piss off Palestinians who are stuck in that area anyway? Trump further provoked Iran by assassinating a top Iranian officer. And a lot of people praise Trump for not getting us into a war while he was in office. But he came close. He came damn close. And as far as the assassination assassination of the Iranian officer, whether we ended up in war was out of our control at that point, really. All hinged on Iran's response to what Trump did. Iran didn't respond with military engagement, which kept us out of war. If they did respond with military engagement, then Trump would have gotten us into a war with Iran, which wouldn't be good for us, wouldn't be good for Iran, wouldn't be good for the world. Now, I'm not trying to defend the Iranian officer he killed. It sounds like the guy was a horrible, brutal person. That doesn't mean we should just go around the world willy-nilly killing everybody that we think is a horrible, brutal person. Trump made a deal with the Taliban, which included a deadline for U.S. troop withdrawal, along with freeing around 5,000 Taliban fighters and leaders. This led to Biden's massive criticisms in our withdrawal from Afghanistan. Withdrawing from Afghanistan was the right move. It's something we should have done a long time ago. We were never going to win in Afghanistan. I mean, we made the bad decision to go in there for revenge. That's why we were there. And so Biden ate the criticism for the withdrawal when it was a plan that Trump had made. It was a deal Trump had made with the Taliban. And no matter who was president, I'm sure you can hear plenty of people claim that if Trump was president, it would have gone completely differently. It wouldn't have been completely differently. It just would have happened earlier. Trump would have pulled the troops out earlier. He would have pulled them out completely and all at once and left a massive vacuum in there. That vacuum still would have been filled by the Taliban that Donald Trump just propped up by getting 5,000 of them released back into the battle. And the thing is, Biden has to accept the criticism. He was the one left holding the bag in Afghanistan. That's the way it works. You had George W. Bush, Obama, you had Trump, and then Biden. All of them president while we had a war going on, an occupation in Afghanistan, active combat in Afghanistan and Iraq. And the thing is, whoever was left in the Oval Office when we pulled out, they're the ones who were going to get stuck with the criticism. That criticism was always going to come because it was always going to be a horrible withdrawal. And finally, on foreign policy, you have the insane talk about Trump, how he and Kim Jong-un fell in love. I wrote the wrong leader here. I put Kim Jong-il, but it's Kim Jong-un is the current leader. Kim Jong-il was his father. And he's the leader of North Korea. Donald Trump talked about how they sent love letters to one another. And one of the things I was hopeful for, because Trump is a weird, kooky guy who loves authoritarian leaders. Kim Jong-un is a brutal, horrible authoritarian leader. And they're both goofy as hell. I was one of the people who was hopeful that Donald Trump would actually be able to accomplish something on this piece of the presidential pie. That he would actually be able to put together some kind of peace deal with North Korea, to perhaps to get the two Koreas cooperating again, perhaps to bring North Korea into the world fold and get them interacting more and peaceably with other countries in the world, to help their economy, to help their people, and to get them away from this insane notion of they need to create nuclear weapons. He failed on that. He in no way deterred or stopped Kim Jong-un's pursuit of nuclear power. Kim Jong-un kept pursuing it. He's still pursuing it to this day. All of that banter about Trump and Kim Jong-un and their love life together, their love letters being sent to one another, nothing. It's just propaganda by Donald Trump. So that covers the notes that I had made as far as really issues I had with Donald Trump. It's different things that he had done while he was in office. And like I said, you may have the perspective of a lot of that stuff you liked, perhaps. You know, there's most of that stuff I just don't like. Some of it's objectively bad, some of it's prospectively bad if you have the perspective that I do. So that's where we were at. That's what I put together as far as my problems with Donald Trump. I started it from the beginning, went through to the end. Now let's go back through your comments and see what else we can address here while I'm going and making a video solely on this comment. You went to Berkeley with your BKPCS for the fight for freedom of speech on campus. You won the right. I'm a big supporter of freedom of speech. I just want to be clear. A lot of times when people on the political right talk about freedom of speech, they're not wanting freedom of speech. They have freedom of speech. What a lot of people are complaining about is they want freedom from consequences for what they say with their freedom of speech. For instance, you have right-wing talkers on YouTube who whine and bitch and moan if they get demonetized because they used their freedom of speech to say something that violated the terms of service of YouTube. If you do that, you're going to get demonetized. And the thing is, their freedom of speech wasn't limited. They used their freedom of speech. There were just consequences for it, and then they whined and moaned about those consequences. Our schools are a complete and total mess. I don't know exactly what you mean by our schools are a complete and total mess. My whole perspective is our schools are horribly underfunded, and if we would fund them better, And we would stop all this nonsense about diverting public funds to private schools, which is a large part of the problem we have right now, and is a major push on the political right, is to divert federal funding to private schools. I'm completely against that. We have public schools. Anybody in this country can go to a public school, and they should be able to get a good education. The only problem is, in order for them to do that, we have to fund them. And if we're taking money from those public schools, pushing them into private schools, which are largely attended by wealthy families, then we're just doing a disservice to a large swath of our population. America has largely been, the Middle East is a volatile place. It's a powder keg. It's a powder keg, and there's too many people over there trying to lot matches. Profits of the war machine. Yeah, our military and industrial complex, that is the war machine. They pay bribes to politicians, to both Democrats and Republicans, and in exchange they get contracts to provide military weaponry, services to the military, and they take massive profits. One of the problems with Afghanistan was we had military contractors who were supposed to equip and train the Afghan defensive forces. As you can see, the way the Taliban swept across Afghanistan and took control back, they didn't do their job as far as equipping and training the Afghan defensive forces to where they could stand their ground and keep a hold of the government. They collapsed easily. So what we had was military contractors who got paid a lot of money, did the minuscule amount of work that they did, stuffed a ton of money, I'm sure billions, if not tens of billions of dollars into their pockets, and they're living the good life. Meanwhile, people in Afghanistan are suffering because of their lackadaisical way of not fulfilling their part of the contract. Our politicians are on the take. Yeah, I'm 100% in agreement with that. Our politicians are, for the most part, on the take. And that's one of the reasons why I lean more Democrat than Republican. There is a contingent within the Democrat Party who is not on the take. You have people like AOC, Ilhan Omar, Anna Presley, you have Ro Khanna, you have Democrats in the Democrat Party who do not take the bribe money. The vast majority of Democrats do, but there is still a contingent growing. It's small, but it's getting larger within the Democrat Party that do not take the bribe money. As far as Republicans, out of the House and the Senate, there's one person, Matt Gaetz, who doesn't take the bribe money. Everybody else takes the bribe money. And Matt Gaetz, if he wasn't in such a solid Republican district, he would take the bribe money too. Let's be serious. We kill family members and create enemies. Well, of course we do. That's one of the way enemies are created in the global arena. Our open border is allowing anybody to come in. We don't have open borders. I don't know where a lot of people get this. We do not have open borders. When Biden took office, he kept Title 42 in place, something I completely disagree with, something I believe is most likely unconstitutional. But as far as I know, it wasn't challenged since Trump put it in. Title 42 was what Trump put in place. During COVID, he declared that we were in a state of emergency because of COVID, and therefore he couldn't allow migrants seeking asylum to come into the country. They had to stay on the Mexico side of the border. And when Biden took office, he kept Title 42 in place. Biden kept Title 42 in place until a judge ordered him to remove it, because once Biden announced that the COVID pandemic was over, the judge said there's no reason to keep Title 42 in place because it was in place because of COVID, because of a national emergency. If the COVID pandemic's over, the national emergency is over, so Title 42 has to go away. So now we're back to Title 8, which is where migrants can come into the country, request asylum, we let them into the country, we set them with a court date, and that's the process we have. I wouldn't say that Biden has been successful on the border by any stretch. Biden has been a miserable failure so far on the border, and one of the things we need are more judges. And it wouldn't cost that much in respect to how massive our federal budget is to put more judges, more immigration judges down there. So we have Biden, he has failed on the border, but we don't have open borders. You know, people will point out all of the apprehensions by Border Patrol of people who were apprehended crossing the border and sent back, and make that out like that's some kind of example of an open border. Obviously, if we're catching people coming across the border and then putting them back on the southern side of the border, it's not open. We're literally ejecting them from the country. Israel will never be able to rid the world of Hamas, not while they're continuing to commit war crimes. They won't. There with USA Help creating more. I'm grateful for the Second Amendment, which may be used to hopefully defend against the incoming terrorist attacks on our country. That I don't understand either. I mean, the largest quote-unquote terrorist attack in U.S. history was 9/11. We haven't had another one of those since 9/11. And most of the terrorist attacks that happen in this country are stochastic terrorism. They're homegrown terrorism. And honestly, the vast majority are around 90% right-wing people, like what we saw on January 6th, where right-wing people terrorize their own country here in America. People born and raised in America terrorize America within the country. So as far as, I don't have a problem with people owning guns. I don't own a gun. Like I've told people before, unless there is a zombie apocalypse, I will not own a gun. I have no reason to own a gun. I'm not in fear of being a target of assassination. I don't engage in criminal activity. I don't hang around with criminals. I live in Vegas. Vegas is a higher crime area than some areas, but your odds of a crime being thrust upon you, of you being attacked and harmed, are very low, honestly. And your odds of being attacked by a terrorist, if a terrorist came into this country, odds are insanely low that terrorist will attack you specifically. That would be literally like saying I'm going to wear a rubber suit every time I go outside in case lightning strikes. It's something I'm not going to do. I'm not going to go outside in a rubber suit to protect myself against lightning, and I'm not going to go outside with a gun strapped to my body because it's really unnecessary. Guns, in my view, cause more problems than they help. If you have an altercation between two people, chances are it's going to end with both people alive if neither one of them has a gun. If you have an altercation between two people and one or both of them have a gun, it's more likely to end in somebody getting killed. I just don't see guns as a problem solver. They're something that can introduce more danger in any given situation. In your 30s and 40s, you would have been considered a bleeding heart liberal. Well, that's maybe true. Ronald Reagan, if he was a Republican right now living and existing, he would be considered a rhino. Ronald Reagan wanted to give dreamers a path to citizenship back in the 80s. And now that's seen as blasphemy on the Republican right. Now you're considered far right-wing. I'd have to hear more of your perspectives as far as how far right-wing I would believe that you are. My views have evolved. I'm far from that. Pretty center, actually. I would like a video on all the reasons that you can't stand our last president. That's what I'm doing here. I just went through my slides of things that Donald Trump did when he was in office that I have issues with, that I think hurts the country overall. He annoys the crap out of you, but when you see his policies, you're aligned with many of them. And that's what I don't really understand either. It's his policies. Donald Trump really doesn't have many policies. When it comes to legislation, Donald Trump really didn't pass much as far as signature legislation, except for the tax cuts, which were broadly unpopular. And like I said, over the long run, over 80% goes to the wealthiest people in the country. Anyway, we're not going to get a fraction of the benefit that the wealthy people are going to get from that. That was a give out to wealthy Americans. And so I don't know what policies. Perhaps you're a fan of the border wall. You believe we have open borders. I tried to explain why I don't agree with the border wall and why I don't think we have open borders. We need a leader that isn't owned by any of the entities that have corrupted this country to such a high level. I don't disagree. Politicians take bribe money for the most part. The vast majority of Democrats and all Republicans in Congress but one take the bribe money. You say you're most aligned with Vivek, which if you're a Trump fan, I can see you liking Vivek. Vivek took a path in the Republican primary, which was to stick his head as far up Trump's anus as he could get it and try and be the most Trumpy person in the primary. That doesn't really necessarily work when you're running against Trump. Vivek in the first debate said Trump was the best president of his lifetime, which undoes his whole reason for being, his whole reason for existing in the primary. If he's the best president we've ever had in your lifetime, why are you challenging him? Why are you not just supporting him? So Vivek I don't get. And I certainly wouldn't align with him. As far as the Republican primary, if I had to choose, I did a video about the Republican primary, you can watch that. If I had to choose a Republican to vote for, I would have supported Christie, because he was at least being honest about Donald Trump, how bad he was for the country, how bad he was for the Republican Party. And even though that's recent for Chris Christie, his old brand of being honest and straightforward, that's something for now. Before, when he had hopes of being in the Trump administration, he was singing a different tune. I don't disagree with that, but right now he is the most real person in the primary, speaking honestly and willing to challenge Trump. Vivek certainly wouldn't, and honestly, I believe Ron DeSantis peed himself a little bit anytime somebody mentioned Trump's name. I believe the war machine cannot allow someone like that to become president. I don't know what you mean by the war machine cannot not allow. I believe the color of Vivek's skin, the fact that he has a funny sounding name and that he's not Christian is things that would keep him from being a Republican presidential selection. You wouldn't be surprised if 45 was killed. I would be very surprised. It would be very difficult in today's world to kill a U.S. president. I would be surprised if Donald Trump is killed. I would be surprised if Biden's killed. They're both old. I wouldn't be surprised if they died of natural causes tomorrow. Biden's in his 80s. Trump's about to enter his 80s. Trump is large. He's very obese. He has a horrible diet made up of a lot of junk, a lot of fast food. And so I wouldn't be surprised if either one of them died tomorrow of natural causes. I would be very surprised if somebody killed them. They've tried everything else. I don't know who they is. Exposing their corruption. Again, I don't know who they are while doing so. How many presidents in the past have promised to move the capital of Israel? All talk. I honestly don't know how many have promised to do that. But again, that is lighting a match in a powder keg. That's why a lot of people never made that move. It's a symbolic move. It doesn't substantially do anything. It's a symbolic move that is lighting a match in a powder keg. That's why it's not been done before. I'm rambling a bit, but I hope you get the gist. I got a lot of the gist. There's some things I don't know exactly what you're alluding to. My only criticism that you may grow your channel, make a list of things that Trump did that were good. So here we get to the part where, okay, what did Trump do that was good? January 6th. That wasn't good. His vile rhetoric, his trying to otherize Hispanic immigrants, that's not good. One thing Donald Trump did that was good was that he fast-tracked the emergency authorization of the COVID vaccine. How did that work out? I mean, you had it was Republicans who were attacking people for the COVID vaccines being experimental. I mean, literally, you had Republicans who would complain that I'm not going to take an experimental vaccine. I'm going to use hydroxychloroquine, which would be an experimental thing too. There was no evidence that helped you. There was no evidence that had efficacy of protecting you against or fighting COVID. And same thing with the horse paste. People would turn to that because they don't want to take an experimental vaccine. They'd rather experiment with other pharmaceuticals to see if that'll work. I mean, it did not make any sense, the direction people went with that. Like I said, Donald Trump did fast-track the authorization process for that vaccine. It was his own supporters, it was his own party that then attacked that very process, that tried to legitimize the vaccine because of that process, but it was good that Trump did it. Now, as far as giving credit to a president, I gave Donald Trump credit for that. But is it that unique to Donald Trump? That is, do I believe another president would not have done that? No. I believe any other person who was holding office at the time that went through the COVID pandemic would have done the same thing. I mean, that's not unique to Trump. I believe any other Republican or Democrat holding office at the time would have fast-tracked the vaccines. That only makes sense. Like I said, I was hopeful in Trump opening up negotiations with North Korea. I mean, I didn't have a problem with Donald Trump going and visiting North Korea. I don't have a problem with Donald Trump inviting the president of North Korea here. I mean, dialogue has to be created in order for you to get any kind of understanding or any kind of peace deal done. So that was good. Donald Trump was willing to open up dialogue with the president of North Korea. As it turns out, the president of North Korea just used that as propaganda for himself. I mean, he's a brutal authoritarian, so it's not surprising he used Donald Trump's willingness to have an open dialogue in person with the guy as propaganda, but that was a good move, showing that as president you can meet with these brutal, horrible, authoritarian dictators and try and come to some agreement that will ease the pain on their people and will ease the stress of people around them, especially when it's in the case of North Korea trying to develop nuclear weapons. Again, he failed at it, but it was a good move to make that path, to carve that path out. Biden so far hasn't made any move to try and talk to Kim Jong-un. It looks like he's not going to, but other presidents could follow in that path. Donald Trump failed at it. Perhaps there's a smarter president who can think of something else to offer North Korea to end up trying to bridge that gap and make them decide, okay, we can do away with our nuclear weapons program in exchange for this, that, whatever. That was mostly the good from Donald Trump, honestly. There was very little that I saw good from Donald Trump's presidency. He fast-tracked the COVID vaccine emergency authorization. The vaccine ended up getting attacked on those grounds, but it was good Trump did it. It was good he opened up communication with North Korea. Shows that it can be done, that you're not a sucker necessarily for doing it, and so that was good. That's mostly that. And you say in here that I did it for Joe, who in your mind is the worst prez ever. I don't know what you mean by that. I listed good things that Joe Biden's done. I've done plenty of videos criticizing Joe Biden where criticism is due. I've done videos defending Joe Biden where he should be defended because he did do something good. I mean, he pulled us out of Afghanistan. That was a good thing, that we needed to be out of Afghanistan. We should never have been there to begin with. We just went there looking for revenge. And, I've explained that Joe Biden should have expected the criticism for the withdrawal. The withdrawal, no matter when it was done, was going to be atrocious. So, as president, you just have to accept that sometimes you're going to bite the bullet for something somebody else did. I participated in and seen so many useless wars. Useless wars, there's so many of them. You're right. It's horrible, and we engage in a lot of it. Put our fingers in too many other countries' pies. You're glad Ben Shapiro doesn't have access to the red button, brother. So am I. I don't want any of these unhinged right-wingers having access to the nuclear arsenal in our country or in any other country. Whether I agree with you or not, your thoughts are clear and well spoken. Thank you. This was a very polite, very respectful comment. And like I said, most of the people who comment on if somebody agrees with me, they don't comment very much. Most of the comments I get are people who don't agree with me, and most of them are just simple personal insults and attacks. Which, I'm a grown man, I can take a personal insult and a personal attack. That's no big deal. But that's most of what I get. That's why this comment stood out. That's why I'm responding to it, because you made a very good, a very respectful, polite response. It sounds like you and I, there's things we don't agree on, perspective-wise. Like I said, that's okay. We don't have to agree. And honestly, I'm not necessarily trying to change people's minds doing what I do. I mean, if I do, so be it. If somebody is able to start critically thinking through the political process and decide, I'm more to the left than what I thought I was, then that's fine. My curiosity isn't what you believe. My curiosity is, why do you believe what you believe? And so as I go through this stuff, I try to explain why I have the perspective that I do. But anyway, thanks for those of you who watched the video. Thanks for the comment, Mr. Williams and Bill Michaels. Thanks for the comment, and thanks for those of you who watched. If you stayed in this long, God bless you. And drop me a like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I hope you all have a very good day.